God once gave a prophet the strangest command in the whole Bible: not to fight a king, not to raise the dead, to fall in love with someone who would break his heart again and again. His name was Hosea, her name was Gomer, and their marriage was not a private tragedy. It was a message written in one man's tears, so that a whole nation and you, tonight, could finally understand how God loves. This story ends in a slave market, with a husband counting out silver to buy back his own wife. You do not need to do anything tonight. The day is over. The night is still, and the story is waiting. Let one of the oldest love stories in the prophets carry you to sleep. Chapter 1. The command no prophet wanted. Every prophet in the Bible was given something hard to carry. Moses was given a stubborn nation and 40 years of sand. Jeremiah was given a message no one wanted and a lifetime of weeping. Jonah was given a city he hated and a storm to change his mind. But Hosea was given something no prophet before him had ever been given. He was not handed a scroll. He was not sent to a palace. He was told to give away his own heart to a person who was going to break it. Before we hear that command, come and stand in his world for a moment, because the command makes no sense until you see the country it was spoken into. The year is somewhere around 750 years before Christ. The northern kingdom of Israel is ruled by a king named Jeroboam II, and under his long reign, the nation is rich, richer than it has been in generations. The borders are wide, the armies are winning, the markets of Samaria are loud with traders, and the houses of the wealthy are paneled with ivory. Archaeologists have actually found pieces of that ivory, carved and delicate, in the ruins of Samaria. Little inlaid panels, lions and lotus flowers and sphinxes, the luxury goods of a golden age. The wealth was real. You can hold pieces of it in a museum today. Walk the streets of that Samaria for a moment. It is late afternoon. The stone is still warm from the sun. Somewhere a merchant is arguing happily over the price of wine, and the smell of roasting grain drifts from a doorway, and children are running between the stalls with the fearlessness of children who have never known a hungry year. Everything about this city says the same thing. We are blessed. Look around you. We are blessed. And the religion of the city says it too. There are altars everywhere, festivals in every season, sacrifices rising in smoke from every high hill. If you measured faith by activity, Israel had never been more faithful. But something had gone quietly wrong underneath all that smoke, and it is the very thing this whole book was written to expose. The worship filling those sanctuaries was no longer aimed only at the God who had brought Israel out of Egypt. It had blended comfortably, respectably, with the worship of Baal, the Canaanite storm god, the god the neighbors said was in charge of rain and grain and fertility. The people had not thrown their God away. That would have been too obvious. They had simply added others, the way you add accounts at different banks, just to be safe. They still said his name. They still kept his feasts. But their hearts had learned to wander while their feet stayed in the sanctuary. The book itself will say it plainly, a chapter later, in one devastating line. She did not know that it was I who gave her the grain, the wine, and the oil. The gifts were his. The thanks went elsewhere. That was the whole sickness, in one sentence. Now, how do you speak to a nation like that? A nation that is not openly rebellious, just quietly unfaithful. A nation that would pass every inspection on paper and fail the one inspection that matters, the inspection of the heart. You could send a lawyer with a list of broken laws. God had done that before, and would again. You could send warnings of armies and exile. Those were coming too. But a list can be argued with. A warning can be postponed. There is a kind of blindness that no argument can reach, because the problem is not in the mind. It is in the affections. So God did something different. He reached for a life. And here is the sentence: the one that opens the Book of Hosea, the command that must have made a young prophet's blood run cold. Go, take to yourself a wife of whoredom, and have children of whoredom, for the land commits great whoredom by forsaking the Lord. Sit with that for a moment, in the dark, the way Hosea must have sat with it. Other prophets were told to speak the message. Hosea was told to live it. His home would become the sermon. His marriage would become the parable. Every meal at his table, every rumor in his street, every sleepless night in his bed was going to preach. And notice something, because this is the detail I most want you to carry into sleep tonight. God did not choose this because he was cruel to Hosea. He chose it because it was the only language left. Israel could no longer hear commandments. But everyone, in every age, understands a broken heart. Everyone knows what betrayal feels like, or fears what it would feel like. So God reached for the deepest pain a human being can know and said, This is what your unfaithfulness feels like. Not to a judge, to a husband. The old rabbis and the church fathers both wrestled with this command, and I will be honest with you, as I always am on this channel. Some of them found it so painful that they suggested the whole marriage was only a vision, a story acted out in Hosea's mind and never in his house. But the book itself never says that. It gives us names and children and a price paid in real silver. Most readers across the centuries have taken it as it stands. A real man, a real woman, a real wound, opened on purpose so that a message could be written inside it. Because here is the strange mercy hiding in this hard command. When God wanted Israel to understand his love, he did not point to his power. He did not point to the sea he had split or the manna he had rained down. He pointed to a husband who would not stop loving. He staked his whole message on the idea that faithful love, wounded and still faithful, is the most godlike thing a human life can show. That means something for you, listening tonight. It means that if you have ever loved someone through disappointment, if you have ever kept a promise that cost you, if you have ever forgiven what you had every right to hold, then you have not been weak. You have been closer to the heart of God than you knew. Hosea heard the command. Scripture records no argument from him, no bargaining, no running toward the sea like Jonah. The text simply moves in the very next verse with 4 quiet words. So he went, knowing, at least in part, what it would cost. A young man walking through the streets of a rich and busy country, carrying a command no one else could see toward a door he had perhaps passed 100 times before. And somewhere behind that door, a woman named Gomer went about her evening, grinding grain or trimming a lamp, not knowing that her name was about to be written into one of the oldest love stories in the prophets, and read aloud at night, in languages she never heard of, by people like us. Nearly 3,000 years later, the command has been given. The prophet is walking. There is no hurry in this story. The road to her door is long enough for you to rest on. Chapter 2. Gomer. Her name appears in only one book of the Bible, and in that book she never speaks. Gomer, the daughter of Diblaim. That is all the introduction Scripture gives her. No description of her face, no record of her voice, no line about how she felt on her wedding day. She is one of the most famous women in the Old Testament, and she is almost completely silent. And yet whole libraries have been written about her, because everyone who reads this book eventually stops at the same question. Who was she, really, when Hosea came to her door? Here I owe you the honesty this channel is built on. The text calls her a wife of whoredom, and readers have understood that phrase in 2 main ways, for centuries. Some scholars believe Gomer was already living an unfaithful life when Hosea married her. Perhaps she was connected to the fertility cults of Baal, where such things were tangled up with worship itself. In that reading, Hosea walked into the marriage with his eyes fully open, choosing a woman the whole town whispered about, because that was the point of the sign. Other scholars read it differently. They believe the phrase describes what Gomer would become, not what she already was. In that reading, she may have come to the marriage like any bride, and the unfaithfulness unfolded later, year by year, the way the nation's unfaithfulness unfolded, generation by generation. The label belongs to the whole story, they say, written back over its beginning. The book does not settle the question for us, and I will not pretend it does. But notice something beautiful. Both readings end in the same place. Whether Hosea knew on the first day, or learned it slowly across 1,000 ordinary days, this remains true. He was sent to love someone who would not stay faithful, and he was sent by a God who knew exactly how it would go. And that is the detail that changes everything, because that is precisely how God entered his covenant with Israel. Listen to what the Lord says later in this same book. When Israel was a child, I loved him. God did not fall for a nation that fooled him. He chose a people already knowing the wilderness complaints, the golden calves, the wandering hearts that were coming. He signed the covenant, if I may say it this way, with the betrayal already in view. Love that knows the cost in advance and pays it anyway. That is the love this book was written to explain, and Hosea's wedding day was its first illustration. So picture the day itself. The Bible gives us nothing here, and I will be honest that what follows is a storyteller's imagining, held gently, the way we always hold such things on this channel. But weddings in ancient Israel were not quiet affairs. There would have been days of feasting, neighbors crowding the courtyard, torches in the evening, and the smell of roasted lamb and crushed grapes, and the long table where the old men sat retelling stories everyone already knew. The bride veiled, the groom's friends singing, the cups going around until the songs got louder and the stars came out over the rooftops. And somewhere in that noise, a young prophet stands beside a woman he has been commanded to love, and he means his vows. That is the part we must not rush past. It would be easier to imagine Hosea gritting his teeth, marrying her the way a soldier follows orders, keeping his heart locked away where she could never hurt it. But the whole book collapses if he did that. The sign only works if the love is real. God's love for Israel was not a cold decree. It was affection, delight, tenderness. So Hosea's love had to be the same, or the parable would be a lie. Which means that somewhere in this marriage, before any of the sorrow, there was joy. Real mornings, real laughter, a shared roof, a shared table, the small wordless language every household invents for itself. The way she set the bread down, the way he looked up when she came in. The Bible's silence leaves room for it, and the logic of the story requires it. Hosea loved his wife, not as an assignment, as a man. If you want to understand this book, you have to let that be true. Because pain is only as deep as the love it wounds. A stranger cannot break your heart. Only someone woven into your days can do that. God was not telling Israel, "You have broken my rules." Rules do not weep. He was telling them, "You have broken something between us. Something that had mornings and laughter in it. Something that was real on my side, even when it was fading on yours." Maybe you know that difference from one side or the other. Most of us do, by a certain age. It is one thing to fail a system. It is another thing to hurt a face. The feast ends, as feasts do. The torches burn down. The guests drift home along the dark lanes, their songs getting thinner in the distance. And a door closes on a new household in Israel, a prophet and his wife, with a lamp burning inside, and the whole story still ahead of them. For now, there is peace in that house. Hold the picture while it lasts. A table with two places. A roof against the night. Two people at the very beginning, when everything is still possible. Heaven knows what is coming. The husband may suspect. The wife does not dream that her name will outlive empires. And in the quiet, before anything goes wrong, a child is about to be born. A son. And God himself is going to choose the name. But that belongs to the next chapter. This one ends here, at the lamplit window of a house where, for tonight at least, love is simple. Let it be simple for you too, just for tonight. Rest here, at the beginning of the story, where the lamp is still burning and no one has left. Chapter 3. Jezreel, the Firstborn. In ancient Israel, a name was never just a sound. A name was a small prophecy spoken over a cradle. Parents named their children after their hopes, after their God, after the story they wanted that little life to tell. Isaac meant laughter because his mother had laughed. Samuel meant heard by God because his mother had prayed. When you called your child in from the fields at sunset, you were not just calling a person. You were repeating a promise. Remember that as this chapter opens, because Gomer has just given birth to a son, the firstborn of the prophet's house, and in any other family in Israel, this would be the sweetest naming day of all. The neighbors would have gathered. The father would have lifted the boy and spoken the name, and the name would have been something bright, something about joy or strength or the goodness of God who gives sons. But this is not any other family. This is the family that is a message. And so the Bible says the Lord himself chose the name, and the name he chose was Jezreel. To our ears, that word means nothing. It is simply a sound from an old language. But to every person in Israel who heard it, that name landed like a stone through a window. Because Jezreel was not a hope, Jezreel was a place, and everyone knew what had happened there. Let me take you to that valley, gently, because the story matters, and I will not linger on its darkness longer than the meaning requires. The valley of Jezreel was one of the most beautiful stretches of land in the whole country. Wide, green, and fertile. A great open plain where the wheat moved in the wind like water. Its very name meant God sows, as if the valley were heaven's own field. But about 100 years before Hosea, that beautiful valley had been soaked in blood. A general named Jehu had seized the throne of Israel there in a purge so violent that even a violent age remembered it with a shudder. Kings were shot down. A queen was thrown from a window. Heads were stacked at the city gate. Jehu claimed he was doing God's work, cleansing the land of the house of Ahab and the worship of Baal. And some of that judgment had indeed been announced by prophets before him. But Jehu went further than judgment. He killed beyond his mandate, with a cruelty that served his own throne more than heaven's justice. And then, having torn down Baal in public, he quietly kept Israel's idols for himself. That was Jezreel, a place where a man did the right thing in the wrongest possible way, and built a dynasty on the blood. And here is the detail that makes the name so sharp. The king now sitting on Israel's throne, Jeroboam II, the king of all that ivory and wine we saw in chapter 1, was the great-grandson of Jehu. His whole dynasty stood on the foundation of that valley. Every feast in the palace was, in a sense, eaten over Jezreel's old stains. So when the prophet's little son toddled through the streets, and Gomer stood at the door at dusk and called him home, the whole neighborhood heard it. Jezreel, supper is ready. Jezreel, come inside now. And every time, the name said what no one wanted to hear. The account is still open. The blood of that valley has not been forgotten. This dynasty, so rich and so secure, is living on borrowed time. The Lord spelled it out when he gave the name. In just a little while, he said, I will punish the house of Jehu for the blood of Jezreel, and I will put an end to the kingdom of the house of Israel. Think about what this means for how heaven keeps its books. A century had passed. The men of that purge were long dead. The nation had moved on, the way nations do, telling the story so that the winners looked clean. But God had not moved on. Not because he is slow to forgive. This whole book exists to prove how far he will go to forgive. No, the name Jezreel says something different. It says that God does not accept the version of history written by the strong. The forgotten victims of that valley had a witness. Their story was still being told, at heaven's insistence, through the name of a child. And I want to pause here, because there is a strange comfort inside this hard chapter, and it belongs to you. If Jezreel means anything, it means that nothing unjust is ever truly buried. Perhaps you have carried something like that. A wrong done to you that everyone else has forgotten. A hurt that the people around you found it convenient not to remember. The world is very good at moving on from other people's wounds. And when it does, the loneliest feeling on earth is to be the only one still holding the memory. The name Jezreel says you were never the only one. God keeps the account you thought no one kept, not to poison you with old anger, but so that you can finally lay it down, knowing it rests in hands that will do justice better than yours ever could. You do not have to be the historian of your own wounds. Heaven already is. Let that settle for a moment. It is a heavy thing, and heavy things settle slowly. But the name holds one more secret, and it is the most beautiful thing in this chapter. I said the word Jezreel means God sows. The same valley name that recalled the bloodshed also, in its plain meaning, spoke of a farmer scattering seed in a field. And at the end of this very book, God picks the name up again and turns it over in his hands like a coin, showing the other face. A day is coming, he says, when I will sow her for myself in the land. The name that meant scattering in judgment will come to mean planting in love. The same word, the same valley, transformed. Hold on to that, because it is the pattern of this entire story. God does not throw away the broken word and choose a new one. He redeems the word. He takes the very name of the wound and makes it the name of the harvest. So the first child of this strange marriage lies asleep in his cradle, carrying a nation's guilt and a nation's hope in the two syllables of his name. He will grow up not knowing, for a while, why grown men fall silent when his mother calls him. And the house of Hosea is still, on most days, a happy house. A young family. One small boy. Bread on the table. The valley is quiet tonight. The child is asleep. And the seed, though no one can see it yet, is already in the ground. Chapter 4. The girl named Not Loved. Some chapters of the Bible you read. This one, you have to feel. Time has passed in the prophet's house. The boy Jezreel is walking now, talking, chasing birds in the courtyard. And Gomer is expecting again. The Bible tells it in one plain line. She conceived again and bore a daughter. A daughter. In that world of fields and flocks, sons were celebrated loudly, but a daughter had her own quiet sweetness. A girl who would stay close to her mother, learning bread and loom and song. If ever there was a moment for this strange marriage to soften into something ordinary and warm, it was this moment. A baby girl, asleep in the crook of her mother's arm. And then the word of the Lord came to Hosea. Call her name Lo-Ruhamah. I need to unfold that name slowly, because everything in this chapter lives inside it. Ruhamah comes from one of the most tender words in the whole Hebrew language. Racham. It is the word for compassion, for mercy, but it is warmer than either of those English words. Its root is connected to the Hebrew word for the womb. So, Racham is womb love, mother love. The fierce, aching tenderness a mother feels for the child of her own body. When the Old Testament wants to say that God's mercy is deeper than reason, it reaches for this word. Like a father has compassion on his children. The psalmist sings, so the Lord has compassion on those who fear him. That is Racham. And Lo is the Hebrew word for no, for not. So the name of this baby girl, chosen by God and announced by her own father, was No Mercy. Not loved, not pitied. The tenderest word in the language, with a door shut in front of it. The Lord explained the name as he gave it. For I will no more have mercy on the house of Israel, to forgive them at all. Now, I have made you a promise on this channel that I will always be honest about what the text says and what it does not. So let me be careful here. The Bible does not say that Hosea and Gomer withheld love from their actual daughter. Of course they did not. She was fed and carried and sung to like any child. The name was a sign, not a sentence over the little girl herself. The message was aimed at the nation, not the nursery. But stay inside that house for a moment and feel what the sign cost. Every name in Israel was spoken dozens of times a day, which means that every single day, in the most ordinary moments, this family had to say the unbearable thing out loud. Come here, not loved. Are you hungry? Not loved. Good night, no mercy, sleep well. The neighbors heard it in the street. The women at the well heard it. And every time, the name did its work. People flinched. People asked. And the answer was always the same. This is what the Lord says is coming. A day when the covenant people will look up for the old mercy, and it will not be there. Why would God speak this way? Why put such a word on a child? Here is the understanding I have come to, and I offer it to you as one reader of this old book to another. Israel had come to treat God's mercy as a law of nature, like the sunrise, like the rain, something that simply happens, no matter what you do in the dark. They sinned, and the harvests still came, so they concluded the sinning did not matter. Mercy had become, in their minds, automatic. And mercy that is automatic is no longer mercy at all. It is furniture. You do not thank the floor for holding you up. So God, through this name, was saying something that terrified precisely because it was true. My mercy is not furniture. It is my choice, made freshly, in love, every single morning. And what is chosen can be withheld. You have been living on grace and calling it luck. Let one small girl's name teach you the difference. There is a hard kind of kindness in that. The way a doctor's honest diagnosis is kinder than a comfortable lie. The name Lo Ruhama was surgery, not cruelty. It was meant to wake a nation before the loss became real, while there was still time to turn. And now let me speak, very gently, to someone listening tonight, because I know who is awake at this hour. Some of you have worn that name, not given by God, but pinned on you by life, by a parent who could not love the way you needed, by a marriage that went cold, by a church, maybe, that made you feel outside the mercy. Somewhere along the way, quietly, you started to answer to not loved. You would never say it out loud, but it is there, underneath, the way a name is always there. If that is you, I need you to hear what this book does with that name. Because the Bible does not leave this little girl in chapter 1. Later, in this very prophecy, God speaks again, and he takes her name in his hands, the same way he took her brother's. I will have mercy, he says, on no mercy. In the Hebrew it shines even brighter. I will racham lo ruhama. I will womb love the one called unloved. And centuries later, the apostles Paul and Peter both reached back and lifted this exact verse out of Hosea and stretched it over everyone who comes to God from the outside. Once you had not received mercy, Peter writes, but now you have received mercy. That is not a small promise tucked in an old book. That is the direction the whole story bends. The name not loved appears in Scripture for one reason, so that God can be seen crossing it out. But on the night this chapter closes, that reversal is still far away. For now, there is a baby girl asleep in a prophet's house, carrying the heaviest name in Israel, too young to know she carries anything at all. Her father watches her sleep, knowing the name is true about the nation and untrue about her, and holding both of those truths at once, the way parents hold impossible things. Let her sleep. Let the name rest until the day it is rewritten. And if you have been wearing it too, let it loosen tonight, just a little. The hand that wrote no mercy over Israel was already planning the day it would write beloved over the same names. Yours is one of them. Sleep now, The rewriting has already begun. Chapter 5. Not my people. Every covenant in the ancient world had a formula, a short sentence that held the whole agreement, the way a wedding ring holds a whole marriage. For Israel, that sentence was the oldest and dearest thing they owned. God had spoken it at Sinai, and the prophets had repeated it for centuries, like a family repeating the story of how the grandparents met. I will be your God, and you will be my people. Say it slowly, because everything Israel was, everything Israel had, hung on those words. Not the land. The land could be lost and was lost. Not the temple. Temples burn. The unbreakable thing, the thing beneath all other things, was that sentence. You will be my people. It was spoken to slaves in Egypt before they had a single victory to their name. It was the reason they existed at all. Now come back to the prophet's house, because Gomer has borne a third child, another son. Picture the room on the naming day. It is crowded and warm. There is flatbread on the low table, and a jar of wine going around, and the smell of oil lamps, and the older two children weaving between the legs of the guests. A newborn cry from the corner, thin and new. The neighbors have come, because neighbors always come, and because by now this family's naming days have become something between a ceremony and a public reading of the news. Everyone remembers the last two names. Everyone is quietly wondering what this one will be. And, for the third time, heaven chooses. Call his name Lo-Ami, not my people. For you are not my people, and I am not your God. Someone must have set their cup down slowly. Someone must have looked at the floor. Do you hear what just happened? The covenant formula, the wedding ring sentence, has been picked up and spoken backward. The first child's name, Jezreel, was a warning about a dynasty. Hard, but political. King's fall. Everyone knows that. The second name, Lo-Ruhamah, was worse. It touched the mercy itself. But even then, a person could imagine mercy pausing and later returning, like rain after a dry season. This third name goes all the way down. It does not pause the relationship. It pronounces the relationship void. Not my people. I am not your God. In the language of that world, many scholars hear in this a formula of divorce. The undoing of Sinai in 6 words. The most secure identity on earth, dissolved in the naming of a baby. And I want to slow down here, because there is something inside this name that most readers rush past, and it is the very thing I believe God wanted his people to feel. The name did not create the separation. It revealed it. Israel had already left. Not with their feet. Their feet were still in the sanctuaries. They still kept the feasts, still sang the songs, still said the covenant sentence at their festivals with full voices. But their trust had moved out long ago. When they wanted rain, they thought of Baal. When they wanted security, they counted soldiers and treaties. When they wanted meaning, they bought it at the high places. The name of the Lord had become a decoration on a life that no longer needed him. So the name Lo-Ami simply said out loud what the heart had already done in silence. You have been living as if you were not my people. Very well. Hear the arrangement you have chosen, spoken plainly in your own streets by a child. There is a fearful honesty in that, and it reaches across 3,000 years into rooms like yours and mine. Because a relationship with God can die exactly this way in any century. Not through one dramatic rebellion, but through a long, quiet moving out. The words stay. The habits stay. And one day the words are a shell. God would rather speak the terrible truth than accept a polite fiction, because only a spoken truth can be answered. A fiction just goes on. Now the family portrait is complete, and what a portrait it is. 3 children in one small house. God sows a name of scattered judgment. Not loved. Not my people. The prophet's household had become a living sentence, read aloud every day at doorways and wells. Judgment, spelled out in children. And if the Book of Hosea ended there, it would be the bleakest scroll in the Bible. But it does not end there. Because the very next verse, the verse that follows the divorce formula with no warning at all, is one of the most stunning reversals in all of Scripture. Yet the number of the children of Israel shall be as the sand of the sea, which cannot be measured or numbered. And in the place where it was said to them, "You are not my people," it shall be said to them, "Children of the living God." No transition, no explanation. Judgment is still hanging in the air, and hope interrupts it in mid-breath. Look closely at the promise, because every phrase is loaded. As the sand of the sea, that is not a new image. That is the exact promise God swore to Abraham under the night sky. The oath, older than Sinai, older than the law, older than the failure. It is as if God reaches back past the broken covenant to the unconditional one and says, "That one still stands. You broke the agreement. You did not break my intention." And then the phrase that undoes the name. In the place where it was said, "You are not my people." In the very place, not in some new location with a fresh start and no history. In the same streets where the terrible name was called at supper time, there the new name will be spoken. Children of the living God. I have thought about that phrase for a long time, and here is what I believe it means for the person listening tonight. God does not relocate you to bless you. He renames you where you stand. The place of your worst sentence becomes the place of your best one. The same kitchen where the marriage went silent. The same bed where the fear circles at 2 in the morning. The same heart that heard, "You are nothing, you belong to no one." In the place where it was said, that is where he intends to say the opposite. Centuries later, the Apostle Paul took these exact verses and did something breathtaking with them. Writing to a church of Jews and Gentiles, he quoted Hosea and said the promise had swung its doors open to the whole world. Those who were not a people at all, outsiders with no covenant, no Sinai, no family sentence, are now called sons of the living God. Which means, if you trace the line honestly, that this baby's terrible name is one of the reasons the good news could reach a room like yours, in a language Hosea never spoke. The name "not my people" exists in the Bible so that God could be seen refusing to leave it as the last word. The naming day guests have gone home now. The lamps are burning down. 3 children sleep under one roof, each carrying a piece of the message, none of them old enough to read it. And their father lies awake, doing what fathers of hard stories do, holding the judgment in one hand and the sand of the sea in the other. You can put both hands down now. The promise is older than the problem. It always was. Chapter 6. The empty side of the bed. There is no verse in the Bible that says the words, "and then Gomer left." I want you to know that before we begin, because I keep my promises to you about what is written and what is not. The Book of Hosea never narrates her leaving. There is no scene at the door, no final argument, no line about a bag packed in the night. Chapter 1 gives us the marriage and the children. Chapter 3 finds her gone so completely that she must be brought back. And between them stands Chapter 2, a long, aching speech in which God speaks as a husband whose wife has left. With the wound fully open, so the Bible does not show us the leaving. It shows us something braver. It shows us the husband, afterward, talking through the ruins. Their mother has played the whore. The speech begins. She who conceived them has acted shamefully. For she said, "I will go after my lovers, who give me my bread and my water, my wool and my flax, my oil and my drink." Stop there, on that one sentence she is given. It is the only time in the whole book we hear Gomer's voice, and even then it is her husband quoting her. "I will go after my lovers, who give me my bread and my water." Everything is in that sentence. Not, "I have fallen in love with someone else." Not even, I am unhappy. Her reasoning is an accountant's reasoning. Bread, water, wool, flax, oil, drink. 6 items, like a list carried to the market. She left, in her own telling, because she believed the supply was better elsewhere. And now hear the heartbreak underneath, the line that turns this from an ancient scandal into a mirror. The husband answers, later in the speech, with the truth she never checked. She did not know that it was I who gave her the grain, the wine, and the oil, and who lavished on her silver and gold. She did not know. Every gift she credited to the lovers had come from the husband all along. The bread on their tables had been grown in his fields, so to speak. She had been living her whole rebellion on his generosity, thanking the wrong name for every meal. This is the moment the 2 stories become one, and the book stops hiding it. Because that is exactly, precisely, what Israel had done with Baal. The rains fell, and Israel thanked the storm god. The harvests came, and Israel credited the idols on the hills. The nation was drowning in gifts from the God of Abraham and mailing its thank you letters to a statue. Gomer's grocery list is Israel's theology. She did not know it was I. And before we shake our heads at either of them, let the mirror turn all the way around, because it is pointed at every century, including ours. This may be the most common spiritual condition there is. Not hatred of God. Almost no one hates God. Just a long, comfortable, unexamined crediting of his gifts to other sources. My own hands, my luck, my market, my lovers, whatever shape they take. The gifts keep coming, because that is his nature, and the thanks keep going elsewhere, because that is ours. Sin, in the Book of Hosea, is not first a broken rule. It is a misdirected gratitude. Now come back to the house, because the speech in chapter 2 is not a lecture. It is a lament, and the Bible lets us feel what the leaving left behind. A man wakes in the grey hour before dawn, out of habit, and for half a breath forgets, then remembers. The other side of the bed is smooth and cold, and has been for some time now. He lies still for a while, listening to the house. The sounds are all familiar and all slightly wrong. The wind finds the same crack in the shutter it always found, but no one murmurs and turns over at the noise. Her comb is still on the shelf by the window. He has not moved it. He is not able to say why. Down the hall, 3 children are sleeping. Soon, one of them will wake and pad across the cold floor and ask again this morning, the question small children ask with terrible simplicity. When is mother coming home? And he will crouch down and smooth the child's hair and give the answer that is not an answer. He will say, "Eat your bread now, little one," and the day will begin. The fire has to be coaxed up from last night's embers. The water jar is lighter than it should be, and someone has to walk to the well, where the other women will go quiet in that particular way when he approaches, and then too loud. The grain has to be ground. The goats do not care that anyone's heart is broken. They stand at the gate and complain until they are fed. Anyone who has ever kept a household running on top of a broken heart knows this rhythm. The bread still has to be made. The children still have to be washed. Grief in real life is not dramatic. It is administrative. It hides inside chores. And the old book honors that hidden grief by giving it a voice at the very top of reality. Because here is the astonishing claim of Hosea chapter 2. When God describes his relationship to his people, this is the scene he chooses. Not a king reviewing rebellious subjects. A husband at dawn, in a house that still smells faintly of someone who is gone. Theologians have a careful word for this. They say the prophets reveal the pathos of God, the feeling of God. Hosea is where that revelation burns hottest. This book insists that the Almighty is not a force balancing accounts, but a person who can be left and who feels the leaving. Whatever mystery surrounds a claim like that, the text will not soften it. God wants Israel, and every listener since, to know that unfaithfulness lands somewhere. Not on a law, on a heart. Maybe that is a strange comfort, but it is a deep one. It means your faithfulness matters more than you think, and your wandering wounds deeper than you think, because on the other side of both is not a system. There is a face. The speech in chapter 2 rises and falls like real grief does. It threatens, then softens, then threatens again, then breaks into longing. We will walk its most beautiful promise in the chapters ahead, including a line about a door of hope that I am saving for you, because it may be the reason some of you were led to this story at all. But tonight ends here, in the quiet house, with the lamp burning low. Somewhere out in the city, a woman is at a feast, laughing at the right moments, wearing gifts she thinks came from the man beside her. She believes she has traded up. She has not yet done the arithmetic of what she left. And back at the house, the husband does the thing that makes this book immortal. He does not change the locks. He does not burn her belongings. He leaves the comb on the shelf. And listen to what he says. In the middle of all the hurt about the future, he refuses to release. Therefore, behold, I will allure her. Allure her. The word lovers use. The pursuit is not over. It has barely begun. Chapter 7. The Courtroom of Heaven. Something changes in the Book of Hosea when you turn from chapter 3 to chapter 4. You can feel it the way you feel a room change when someone official walks in. For 3 chapters, we have been inside a house, a marriage, 3 cradles, an empty bed. Now the house falls away, and we are standing somewhere much larger. Picture the setting the prophet's words create. In the ancient world, court was held in the open, at the city gate, in the morning, before the heat. The elders sat on stone benches worn smooth by generations of verdicts. The accused stood in the dust. Witnesses pressed in close, and behind them the ordinary traffic of the gate went on, donkeys and baskets and shouted greetings, so that justice was done in the middle of life, where everyone could see it and smell the bread from the ovens while it happened. Into a scene like that, the prophet lifts his voice. And the opening words are not the words of a husband. They are the words of a court. Hear the word of the Lord, O children of Israel, for the Lord has a controversy with the inhabitants of the land. That word, controversy, is a legal term in Hebrew. The word is riv, and it means a lawsuit. A formal complaint brought before witnesses, with charges read aloud. This is the moment the private story becomes public. The husband has walked to the city gate, and the whole nation is named in the case. And here is what I want you to notice first, because it frames everything that follows. In this courtroom, God is not the judge. Not at first. He is the plaintiff, the wounded party. He is the one bringing the complaint, the way a betrayed husband brings a grievance. The book has not changed subjects at all. It has only widened the lens. Gomer filled the frame before. Now Israel does. And the charge sheet against the nation reads exactly like the story we just lived through in that little house. Listen to the charges as the prophet reads them. There is no faithfulness, no steadfast love, and no knowledge of God in the land. Swearing, lying, murder, stealing, and committing adultery. They break all bounds, and bloodshed follows bloodshed. 5 crimes in a row, and if you know your Bible, you will recognize the list. Those are the 10 commandments, cited almost in order, like statutes quoted in a courtroom. The covenant made at Sinai has become the evidence against the people who signed it. But the heart of the lawsuit is not the list of crimes. It is the diagnosis underneath them, and it arrives in one of the most famous sentences in the prophets. My people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. We have to slow down on that word, knowledge, because English flattens it and the whole case turns on it. In Hebrew, to know, the word da'at, is not about information. It is about intimacy. It is the word the Bible uses for the closeness of a husband and wife. Adam knew his wife, Genesis says, and she conceived. So when God says his people lack knowledge, he is not saying they failed a theology exam. Israel had priests, scrolls, festivals, and memorized prayers. Information was everywhere. What had died was acquaintance, the living familiarity of two persons who actually walked together. They knew about him the way you know about a public figure. They no longer knew him the way you know a face across your own table. And that is why the courtroom and the marriage are the same story. Gomer did not leave because she lacked facts about her husband. She left because the knowing had gone out of the marriage, and once the knowing goes, the gifts get credited to strangers. A nation can do the same thing with God, and this lawsuit says Israel did. Then the charges take a turn that must have made the crowd at the gate go very still, because the accused suddenly changes, and it is not the people. Yet let no one contend, and let none accuse, the Lord says, for with you is my contention, O priest. The court turns and faces the clergy, and what follows is one of the most searing indictments of religious leadership anywhere in Scripture. The priests were the ones appointed to teach the knowledge of God, to keep the acquaintance alive from generation to generation. Instead, the text says, they feed on the sin of my people. They are greedy for their iniquity. Follow the terrible logic of that. The sacrificial system had become a business. Every sin offering brought meat to the priest's table, so the priests, quietly, had stopped fighting sin. Sin had become their revenue. The watchmen were being paid by the very darkness they were hired to watch for. And then comes the sentence that has echoed down the centuries. Like people, like priest. The corruption flowed both ways, leaders and people shaping each other, until no one remembered who had started it. I will not pretend that verse has nothing to say to later centuries, including ours. Whenever the message of God becomes a market, whenever a shepherd's income depends on the flock staying hungry, Hosea chapter 4 stands up in its old courtroom and reads the charge again. The text does not let us aim it only at ancient priests. It is a plumb line, and it hangs wherever holy things are sold. But now, here is the strangest thing about this entire lawsuit, and it is the thing I most want you to carry towards sleep. Read the whole chapter and the whole case, and look for the sentence where the verdict is handed down and the punishment executed. You will find warnings. You will find the promise that a nation which sows the wind will reap the whirlwind. But the case keeps pausing. The plaintiff keeps interrupting his own prosecution. Even in this chapter, God suddenly pleads, though you play the whore, O Israel, let not Judah become guilty. He is suing one child and shielding another in the same breath. He does not walk out. He keeps speaking. And that, if you look at it slowly, is already mercy. Because here is the secret of the Riv, the lawsuit of heaven. Its goal was never the sentence. A lawsuit, in that world, was often the last resort of a party who still wanted the relationship. You sued the covenant partner you refused to simply walk away from. The alternative to the lawsuit was not peace. It was abandonment, silence, the quiet closing of a file. God's controversy with Israel was the loudest possible proof that he had not closed the file. So hear the strange comfort inside this stern chapter. If God is contending with a people, it is because he still counts them his. The opposite of love is not the courtroom. The opposite of love is when the plaintiff stops showing up. The morning session is over now. The elders rise from the smooth stone benches. The crowd drifts back into the traffic of the gate, carrying what they heard. The charges hang in the air of the old land, over the ivory houses and the busy shrines. And the plaintiff walks out of the courtroom and does something no one in any court has ever done. He begins to plan, not the enforcement of the verdict, but a journey. A strange journey into the wilderness, of all places, with the defendant. Because he does not want to win the case. He wants her back. That journey is the next chapter. For now, let the gavel rest. No verdict falls tonight. Chapter 8. The Wilderness of Allurement. Every love story has a place it keeps returning to. A street, a season, a song. The place where it began, before everything got complicated. For God and Israel, that place was the wilderness. It sounds wrong at first. The wilderness was the hard chapter. 40 years of sand and manna, of thirst and complaint, between Egypt and the promised land. No one in Israel looked back on the desert as the good old days. And yet, in the memory of God, as the prophets record it, those years glow with a strange warmth. Because in the wilderness, Israel had nothing but him. No fields to credit to Baal, no ivory houses, no alliances. Just a people and their God, alone together under the desert stars, a bride and a bridegroom on a long walk home. The prophet Jeremiah heard God speak of it this way: I remember the devotion of your youth, your love as a bride, how you followed me in the wilderness. Keep that in your mind. And now listen to what may be the most surprising sentence in the entire book of Hosea. The lawsuit is still hanging in the air. The charges are proven. The whole city gate heard them read, and into that courtroom silence God speaks. Therefore, behold, I will allure her and bring her into the wilderness and speak tenderly to her. You have to stop at the first word. Therefore, every listener in Israel knew how that sentence was supposed to end. Therefore, judgment. Therefore, exile. Therefore, the armies from the north. The word therefore, after a proven case, is the hinge on which the sentence swings. And instead, what swings through the door is a courtship. Therefore, I will allure her. The Hebrew word for allure is the word for romantic persuasion. It is the language of a young man winning a heart, whispering, wooing. Scholars have noted for centuries that this is the vocabulary of courtship, not court. The plaintiff has torn up his own closing argument, walked across the courtroom, and begun, of all impossible things, to woo the defendant. Say it more simply, he won the case, and he set the verdict down, because the verdict was never the thing he wanted. And where does he take her? Into the wilderness, back to the empty place, back to where it started. Here is the insight at the center of this chapter, and I have thought about it for a long time. The wilderness in this book is not the punishment. The wilderness is the place without rivals. Feel the difference between the two landscapes. In the cities of Israel, every good thing had a crowd of possible senders. The rain fell, and there stood the shrine of Baal on the hill, taking the credit. The harvest came in, and the markets and the treaties and her own two hands all lined up to be thanked. Every gift arrived with a dozen forged signatures. But the desert is honest. In the desert there is one well, and you know who led you to it. One cloud of shade, and you know who sent it. Bread arrives in the morning on the ground, and there is no one else it could possibly be from. The desert does not create love. It creates clarity. And clarity is where dead love can breathe again. God is not dragging Israel into the desert to hurt her. He is inviting her to the one landscape where the noise stops, where the forged signatures fall away, and every gift has one hand behind it, and the old knowing has room to come back. And then the tenderness. I will speak tenderly to her. In Hebrew, the phrase is literally, I will speak upon her heart. It is the language a comforter uses with the grieving. The language a bridegroom uses with a frightened bride. After all the shouting of the lawsuit, heaven lowers its voice. Now comes the promise that I told you, chapters ago, I was saving. Because inside this wilderness courtship, God names a specific place, and the name carries one of the darkest memories in Israel's story. And there I will give her her vineyards, and make the valley of Achor a door of hope. The valley of Achor. Every Israelite flinched at that name. Achor means trouble, and the valley earned it on the very first days in the promised land. After the fall of Jericho, a man named Achan stole what was devoted to God, hid it under his tent, and the sin cost Israel a battle and cost lives. The judgment that followed happened in that valley, and Joshua named the place Trouble, so no one would forget. The Valley of Achor was Israel's monument to the day everything went wrong, at the threshold of everything going right. And God, courting his unfaithful bride, points at that exact valley and says, "That one, that is where I will hang the door of hope." Not a valley with a clean history. Not a new valley. The valley of the worst memory becomes the doorway of the new beginning. It is the same grammar of grace we have watched all night. The name Jezreel turned from scattering to sowing. The name not loved, waiting to be crossed out. And now a geography of failure remapped as an entrance. God does not build his doors of hope in neutral territory. He builds them on purpose, in the places named Trouble. I want to say this carefully and gently to whoever needs it tonight. You have a Valley of Achor. Almost everyone does, by a certain age. A year you cannot think about without wincing. A decision that cost more than you could afford. A place on the map of your life, labeled in your own handwriting, Trouble. And the instinct of every human heart is to fence that valley off. Root around it. Never go back. But the promise of Hosea chapter 2 is that God's instinct runs the opposite way. The valley you fenced off is precisely where he likes to build. Hope that has a door in the valley of trouble is the only hope strong enough to be trusted. Hope built anywhere else has never been tested. And how does the courtship end? With one of the most beautiful lines in the prophets. "And there she shall answer, as in the days of her youth, as at the time when she came out of the land of Egypt." She shall answer. The word can mean to respond, to sing back. The bride who went silent finds her voice again. And in that day, God says, "You will call me my husband, and no longer call me my master." Because the word for master in Hebrew was Bali, the same syllables as the name of the idol. Even the vocabulary of the old unfaithfulness will be retired. She will not relate to him as a servant calculating obligations, but as a wife who is home. That is where the courtship rests tonight. A promise spoken over a woman who has not yet turned around. A door standing ready in a valley she is still afraid to enter. The desert wind moves over the empty land. It slides across the stones and stirs the dry brush and settles. And it sounds, if you listen long enough, less like desolation and more like someone patiently waiting. If there is a wilderness season in your life right now, hold this chapter against it. It may not be the punishment you assumed. It may be the quiet place where an old love is trying to get you alone, away from the noise, to speak upon your heart. Let it speak tonight. The vineyards are coming. The door is already hung. Chapter 9. The Slave Market. The third chapter of Hosea is only 5 verses long. 5 verses. In your Bible, it fits in the palm of your hand. And yet inside those 5 verses stands one of the most piercing scenes in the whole Old Testament. Whole books of theology have been written trying to hold what these few lines hold. Tonight, we are simply going to walk into the scene, slowly, and let it happen around us. Here is the first verse, exactly as it stands. "And the Lord said to me, Go again, love a woman who is loved by another man and is an adulteress, even as the Lord loves the children of Israel, though they turn to other gods." Go again. 2 words, and they carry the whole weight of the years. The first command, all those chapters ago, was hard enough. Go, take to yourself a wife. But a man can obey a hard command once, on the strength of a young heart that does not yet know what it is agreeing to. This command comes to an older man, a man who has already lived the betrayal, already raised the children, already lain awake on the empty side of the bed. God is not asking Hosea to begin a painful story. He is asking him to reopen one. Go again. Love her again, knowing everything you now know. And notice the word not. Take her back. Not retrieve her. Love her. The command was never about possession. It was about the heart. Anyone can reclaim property. Only love can reclaim a person. Now, where was Gomer? The text does not narrate her fall, but the next verse lets us see exactly where the road she chose had ended. Because when Hosea goes to her, he does not knock on a lover's door. He brings money. So I bought her, the prophet writes, for 15 shekels of silver and a homer and a lethech of barley. Let those words settle, because they mean what you fear they mean. The woman who left for the lovers with their bread and their wool, the woman who believed she was trading up, is standing somewhere being sold. The Bible does not tell us how it happened, and I will not invent a history for her. Debt, most scholars think. In that world, when the money ran out, human beings became the collateral. The lovers with the full hands were gone. That is the one thing the silence makes clear. Whatever their promises had been, none of them were standing beside her now. So picture the scene the text implies. And I will tell you honestly that the details of the marketplace are a storyteller's imagining, built on what we know of that world. A market day. The dust hangs in the morning light. There are pens of sheep complaining at the far end, and stacks of clay jars, and bolts of dyed cloth, and the sellers calling their prices over one another. The smell of animals and crushed herbs and someone's cooking fire. And in one corner, people, human beings standing in a row, being appraised. Eyes down, because that is what shame teaches. And somewhere in that row, a woman who was once a prophet's wife, once a mother of 3, once the subject of every rumor in town. The crowd would have known her. That is the sharpest edge of the scene. This was not an anonymous city. Faces would have turned. Whispers would have moved through the market like wind through barley. And then, through that crowd, a man walks forward, and every whisper stops at once. Because it is him, the husband. Everyone knows what she did to him. Everyone has had an opinion about it for years, at wells and doorways and suppers. And now the whole marketplace holds its breath to see what he has come for. Revenge would be understood. Cold satisfaction would be understood. A man is entitled, the crowd would say, to watch the story reach its fitting end. He raises his hand, and he bids. 15 shekels of silver, and a homer and a half of barley. Stay with that price, because the Bible recorded it on purpose, and it is stranger and sadder than it first appears. It is a mixed payment, part silver, part grain. And for as long as people have studied this book, readers have seen in that mixture a quiet, devastating detail. It looks like the payment of a man who did not have enough silver, a man who reached the required price only by adding sacks of barley to every coin he had. Scholars debate the exact values, and I will not pretend more certainty than the text gives. But the picture the payment paints has moved readers for centuries. Hosea did not buy his wife back out of his abundance. He emptied himself, the silver, and then the pantry. Whatever it took, the price of her freedom was everything he had, gathered from every corner of his house. Imagine him the night before, if you will allow one more quiet imagining. A lamp on the table, the coins counted out once and counted again, and the total coming up short. And then the walk to the storeroom. The grain that was supposed to feed the household through the spring poured out, measured, tied into sacks. A man deciding, in the dark, that his children would eat a little plainer this year because their mother was coming home. And here the two threads of our whole night finally touch, and you can feel the book trembling as they do. In the courtroom chapters, we watched a lawsuit where the wounded party refused to collect the verdict. And I told you then that the plaintiff would do something no court had ever seen. Here it is. The one who was betrayed is paying. The innocent party is settling the debt of the guilty one. The husband is buying back what was already his by right, because rights were never what he wanted. He wanted her. The Bible will not let this stay in one ancient marketplace, and neither will I, because the whole scene points forward like an arrow. Centuries later, the Apostle Peter would write to believers scattered across the world, "You were ransomed, not with perishable things such as silver or gold, but with the precious blood of Christ." Ransomed, bought back. The vocabulary of the slave market became the vocabulary of the good news. And when Christians stand in that marketplace with Hosea, they cannot help seeing another purchase on another day, where the price was not counted in shekels, and the one who paid it also emptied everything he had. But let us not leave the scene yet, because the text holds one more moment, and it is the most human of all. The purchase is complete. The silver is counted into a stranger's palm. The barley is handed over, sack by sack. And now the woman stands free, or almost free, beside the man she left. The crowd is still watching. And what does he say, in front of them all? Every listener in Israel would have braced for the rebuke. It would have been deserved. Instead, the third verse of Hosea chapter 3 records his words to her, and they are not about the past at all. He speaks to her about the future. "You must dwell as mine for many days," he says. And then, the sentence that undoes me every time I read it, "And so will I also be to you. I will be yours too." He binds himself in the same breath that he binds her. The buyer, standing in a slave market, voluntarily takes on obligations to the one he just bought. No one in that marketplace had ever heard of such a thing. Slaves are owned. Wives who have fallen this far are, at best, tolerated. But Hosea speaks to her like a bridegroom making vows, as if the years had not happened. No, better than that. As if the years had happened, every one of them, and the vow was being made anyway, by a man with his eyes wide open, exactly the way it had been made the first time, by a God who knew everything in advance. The market noise resumes behind them. Somewhere, coins are changing hands over sheep and jars, and the world goes on, unaware that in one dusty corner it has just been shown the very heart of God. And a man and a woman walk out of the marketplace together, not touching yet, not talking yet, with the longest conversation of their lives still ahead of them. The redemption took a morning. The healing will take the years. That is the next chapter. But the hardest part, the part everyone said was impossible, is finished. She was bought back. It is done, and it cannot be undone. Whatever you are carrying tonight, let those words rest on it. Bought back. Done, not undone by anything since. Sleep now, inside that purchase. Chapter 10. You must dwell with me many days. The walk home from a slave market is not recorded in any book of the Bible. We do not know if they spoke. We do not know if the children were told that morning or that evening, or how a mother explains years of absence to a boy named God Sows and a girl named Not Loved. Scripture, with its usual mercy, draws a curtain over that walk. What it gives us instead is the sentence Hosea spoke, and the strange, wise, difficult arrangement folded inside it. You must dwell as mine for many days. You shall not play the whore or belong to another man. So will I also be to you. And then the text adds its explanation, because everything in this marriage is a message. For the children of Israel shall dwell many days without king or prince, without sacrifice or pillar. Afterward, the children of Israel shall return and seek the Lord their God. Many days. Hold on to that phrase, because it is the key to this whole quiet chapter. The redemption happened in a moment. The silver was counted in minutes. But what follows redemption is not a feast and a fresh start by sundown. What follows is many days, a long, unglamorous, in-between season. She is home, but the home must be rebuilt. She is his, but the trust must be regrown, root by root, like an orchard after a fire. I want to sit inside this arrangement with you because I believe it is one of the most practically wise passages in the whole Old Testament, and it is almost always rushed past on the way to the famous verses. Notice, first, what Hosea does not do. He does not pretend. He does not walk her through the door and announce that everything is as it was. Love that pretends the wound never happened is not deeper love. It is thinner love. Love that cannot bear to look at the truth. Hosea looks straight at the truth and builds the future on top of it with boundaries. You will dwell, you will not wander, and I will be here. It is structure offered as tenderness, a trellis for a vine that has been on the ground too long. And notice, second, what he does not demand. He does not demand instant feeling. Nowhere in the arrangement does he say, "You must love me completely by morning." The many days are the point. He gives the healing the one gift it cannot do without, and the one gift our impatient hearts least want to give. Time. Room for the slow rebuilding that cannot be commanded, only kept company. There is a profound insight about love hiding here, and once you see it everywhere. Redemption is an event. Restoration is a process. The buying back happened once, in public, in an hour. The becoming whole happens in private, in 10,000 ordinary moments. Meals eaten, mornings survived, small trusts extended and honored. The Bible gives one verse to the purchase and gives the phrase, "many days to the healing." And in that proportion, it tells the truth about every deep repair you have ever attempted in your own life. Picture the house in that first season, because the text invites us to imagine it, even as it stays silent. The first supper, eaten mostly in quiet, the children stealing glances. The first morning she wakes in her own house and lies still, listening, half expecting to be told it was temporary. Her comb, still on the shelf by the window, exactly where she left it, because he never moved it. The moment she notices that, and what it does to her. Small things. Day after day of small things. A jar filled without being asked. A cloak mended. A name spoken gently that used to be spoken carefully. Nothing that would make a story. Everything that makes a life. Maybe you know these many days from the inside. Perhaps you have been the one waiting for trust to regrow, keeping the boundaries, keeping the faith, wondering why the heart does not hurry. Or perhaps you have been the one who came home, forgiven in a moment but healing by inches, ashamed that the inches are so slow. Hear what this chapter says to both of you. Slow is not failing. Slow is how orchards grow. The arrangement in Hosea chapter 3 is heaven's own signature on the slow method. If God himself, the great restorer, budgets many days for the mending of a heart, then no one gets to shame you for needing them too. Now widen the lens, the way this book always does, because the prophet tells us plainly what the many days meant for the nation. Israel, he says, will spend a long season without king or prince, without sacrifice or pillar, stripped of both the corrupt court and the corrupted worship. Everything false taken away, and for a while, nothing visible put in its place. History filled in the details. The exile came, the kingdom fell, and the people learned to seek God in a foreign land with no temple, no altar, no throne, nothing in their hands at all. And the prophecy insists that the empty season was not abandonment, it was the many days. The wilderness arrangement, written across a whole people, not the end of the covenant, but its convalescence. And afterward, the text promises, afterward they shall return and seek the Lord their God, and David their king, and they shall come in fear to the Lord, and to his goodness in the latter days. They shall come in fear to his goodness. What a phrase that is. Trembling, not before his wrath, but before his kindness. That is what the far side of the many days looks like. A heart so remade that goodness itself becomes the overwhelming thing. Anyone can fear judgment. Only the healed fear goodness, the way you tremble at a sunrise after a long illness, hardly able to believe you are standing in it. So the house on the edge of town begins its long, quiet chapter. 2 people at one table, learning to talk again. 3 children learning that a mother's chair is filled. Neighbors slowly running out of things to whisper. Nothing dramatic will happen in this house for a long time. And that is exactly the miracle. The absence of drama, day after day, is what the rebuilding looks like from outside. The lamp burns in the window each evening. The same lamp we left burning at the end of their wedding chapter, all those years and sorrows ago. It has seen everything. It burns anyway. And if your own life is somewhere in the many days tonight, between the redemption and the wholeness, between what was bought back and what is still being rebuilt, then let this house be your evidence. The in-between is not the story stalling. It is the story working. The days are being counted, and they are counted by someone patient. Afterward is coming. The book has promised. Chapter 11. When God speaks like a parent. Something remarkable happens in the 11th chapter of Hosea. The book changes its picture of God. For 10 chapters, we have lived inside one metaphor. The husband, the wounded marriage, the love that buys back what left it. And that picture has carried us far. But every picture of God, even the truest, can only carry so much. And in chapter 11, as if the prophet realized the marriage image had reached its limit, the book quietly sets it down and picks up another. Listen to how the chapter opens. When Israel was a child, I loved him, and out of Egypt I called my son. My son, not my bride, my son. The betrayed husband steps back for a chapter, and in his place stands a parent, remembering. And I cannot read that opening line without telling you where it traveled. Because centuries later, the Gospel of Matthew reached back and lifted this exact sentence, out of Egypt I called my son, and set it over the childhood of Jesus, when his family carried him down to Egypt to escape a murderous king, and brought him home again when the danger passed. Matthew saw in that small family's journey the whole shape of Israel's story, gathered up and repeated in one child. Whatever else that tells us, it tells us this. The words of Hosea did not stay in the 8th century before Christ. They kept walking. The early church knew this book and treasured this chapter and heard its heartbeat under the story they loved most. Now come back to the parent, remembering. What the parent remembers is one of the most tender passages in the whole Old Testament. I will read it to you slowly, because it deserves slowness. It was I who taught Ephraim to walk. I took them up by their arms, but they did not know that I healed them. I led them with cords of kindness, with the bands of love. And I became to them as one who lifts the little child to his cheek. And I bent down to them and fed them. Do you see what the prophet is doing? He is giving us God in the posture no one expects. Not enthroned, not thundering. Crouched down, the way every parent has crouched, arms out, coaxing a wobbling toddler across a floor. I taught Ephraim to walk. Ephraim was another name for Israel, the beloved northern tribes. And God remembers their entire national story, the Exodus, the wilderness, the manna, the healing, as a parent remembers the baby years. I carried them. I fed them by hand. I lifted them to my cheek. That last image deserves a moment of its own. One who lifts the little child to his cheek. Scholars discuss whether the picture is a parent raising an infant to their face, or a farmer easing the yoke on a young animal so it can eat. I will tell you honestly that the Hebrew allows both readings, but the tenderness is identical in either one, and the parental frame of the chapter has led most readers, ancient and modern, to see the child. A small face pressed against a larger one. Skin to skin. The oldest comfort in the world. And then, folded inside the warmth, comes the line that carries the ache of every parent who ever lived. But they did not know that I healed them. They did not know. The child never does. No toddler keeps a ledger of the fevers a mother sat through, the meals that appeared, the dangers steered around before the child ever saw them. Care, when it is done well, is invisible to the one receiving it. That is almost its definition. And God, in this chapter, stands in that exact parental place. A whole nation walked on legs he taught to walk, ate bread he provided, survived diseases he healed, and credited all of it elsewhere. We have heard this grief before in this book. She did not know it was I who gave her the grain, the wife who thanked her lovers. Now the child who never noticed the healing. 2 pictures, 1 wound. But the child grew. And the chapter turns, as this book always turns, toward the sorrow. The more they were called, the more they went away. They kept sacrificing to the Baals. The son is grown now, and the grown son is leaving, and the parent watches the road. What follows is the threat of consequences, spoken in the language of that age. The sword. The return to a bondage, like Egypt. Assyria rising in the north like a storm you can already smell. The prophet does not soften the history that is coming, and I will not soften it either. The northern kingdom really did fall. The exile really happened. This book was not wrong. And yet, right at the edge of that darkness, comes the passage that many readers across many centuries have called the most astonishing window into the heart of God in the entire Old Testament. God is speaking, and the sentence begins as a sentence of judgment. And then, mid-breath, it breaks. How can I give you up, O Ephraim? How can I hand you over, O Israel? My heart recoils within me. My compassion grows warm and tender. I will not execute my burning anger. I will not again destroy Ephraim. For I am God and not a man, the Holy One in your midst, and I will not come in wrath. Read that again in the quiet of your room someday. My heart recoils within me. The Hebrew word for recoils is the word used for something being overturned, turned upside down. It is the word used elsewhere in Scripture for the overthrow of cities. God says the overthrow will happen, but not out there. In here, within me. The upheaval that justice demanded falls, somehow, inside the heart of God instead of on the head of the child. And then the reason, and it is the deepest sentence in the chapter. For I am God and not a man. We usually use that kind of phrase to make God more distant. His ways are higher, his thoughts are not ours. Stand back. But look at what the sentence actually does here. It is the explanation for mercy. A man, the verse implies, would give up by now. A human father, betrayed this long and this publicly, would have his limits, and no one would blame him. The love of even the best parent runs on human fuel, and human fuel runs out. I am God and not a man means my love does not have the failure point yours has. Where a man's patience would have ended, mine is only getting started. The distance between God and humanity in this chapter is not the distance of coldness. It is the distance of a love that outlasts every human breaking point. I want to leave that with the parents listening tonight and with everyone who has ever loved a person who kept walking away. You know the road watching. You know the phone that does not ring, the door that stays closed, the years of the far country. And you know the shame of your own limits, the nights you felt your love running dry and hated yourself for it. Here, Hosea 11. Your love was never meant to be infinite. Only his is. You can set the child you cannot save into hands that taught nations to walk. The parent in this chapter is still watching that road. And his compassion, the text says, grows warm and tender. Not cold with the years, warm. The chapter closes with a promise shaped like a homecoming. They shall come trembling like birds from Egypt, like doves from the land of Assyria, and I will return them to their homes, declares the Lord. Like doves, coming home the way doves come home, by an instinct older than their own memory, to the window they were fed at. The son will return. The parent has decided it, inside his own overturned heart, at his own cost. And the light is on. Sleep now, the way a child sleeps, whose father is still awake. Chapter 12. The Names Reversed. Every story we have walked through tonight left something unfinished. 3 things, to be exact. 3 names hanging over 3 children in a small house in Israel. God sows, spoken as scattering. Not loved. Not my people. We have carried those names all night, the way that family carried them, through streets and market days and suppers. And I promised you, chapters ago, that this book does not leave them as they fell. Tonight the promise comes due, because near the end of Hosea's 2nd chapter, in the passage where the courtship in the wilderness reaches its full flowering, God turns and faces the 3 names directly, and one by one, in reverse, he takes them apart. Here is the passage. And in that day, declares the Lord, I will answer the heavens, and they shall answer the earth, and the earth shall answer the grain, the wine, and the oil, and they shall answer Jezreel. And I will sow her for myself in the land. And I will have mercy on no mercy. And I will say to not my people, you are my people. And he shall say, you are my God. Let us take them slowly, the way you unwrap things that matter. First, Jezreel. The name that meant God sows, worn like a scar because of a valley full of old blood. Listen to what has happened to it. I will sow her for myself in the land. The name has not been erased. It has been turned over, like soil in spring. The same word that once meant scattering in judgment, a nation thrown like seed to the winds of exile, now means planting in love. Think about a farmer scattering seed. For one moment in the air, the motion looks exactly like throwing something away. Identical. The difference is the intention and the harvest. God says, what looked like my throwing you away was my planting you. Same field, same motion, different ending entirely. And notice the chain of answering that leads to it. The heavens answer the earth. The earth answers the grain. The grain answers Jezreel. It is a picture of all creation coming back into conversation, link by link, like a house where everyone stopped speaking, and then, one door at a time, the talking returns. That is what restoration looks like in this book. Not a lightning bolt. A conversation resuming. Second, Lo Ruhamah, the girl called not loved. No mercy. The tenderest word in the language with a door shut in front of it. Now hear the door open. I will have mercy on no mercy. In the Hebrew, the sentence is almost unbearably beautiful. I will rakam lo ruhamah. The womb love, the mother love, poured out on the one whose name denied it. God does not give her a different name and quietly retire the old one. He speaks the old name and overturns it in the same breath, so that everyone who ever heard the curse will hear the blessing land on the exact same syllables. The reversal is aimed. It knows precisely where the wound was. Third, Lo Ami. Not my people. The covenant formula spoken backward. The divorce in 6 words. Now watch it turn. I will say to not my people, you are my people. The oldest sentence in Israel's story, the Sinai sentence, spoken forward again. But do not miss the last line, because the miracle is not complete without it. And he shall say, you are my God. The reply, all night we have waited for the other voice. The bride who went silent. The child who never noticed the healing. The people who thanked the idols. Every sorrow in this book was, at bottom, an unanswered call. And here, at the end of the reversal, the answer finally comes. You are my God. 4 words, and heaven gets back the only thing it ever wanted, which was never the sacrifices, never the festivals. It was the answering voice. Now, if this were only an ancient promise to an ancient nation, it would still be beautiful. But I told you at the beginning of tonight that this story was written so that you could understand how God loves. And here is where that becomes literal, historical, traceable. Because centuries after Hosea, two men sat down to write letters, and both of them reached for these exact verses. And both of them did the same breathtaking thing with them. The Apostle Paul, writing to the Romans, quoted Hosea word for word. "Those who were not my people I will call my people, and her who was not beloved I will call beloved." And Paul applied it explicitly, not only to Israel but to the Gentiles, to the outsiders, to the nations who had never stood at Sinai, never carried the covenant, never even heard the sentence they were now being written into. And the Apostle Peter, writing to scattered believers across the Roman world, ordinary people in ordinary towns, closed the circle with words that are almost pure Hosea. "Once you were not a people, but now you are God's people. Once you had not received mercy, but now you have received mercy." Do you see what that means? It means the names of those three children were never only about one family or even one nation. The reversal was written wide enough from the very beginning to reach every person who would ever answer to "not loved" or "not my people," which means it was written wide enough to reach the room you are lying in right now. If you have ever stood outside a belonging, looking in, if mercy ever felt like something issued to other people, then these verses have your address on them, and they have had it for nearly 3,000 years. That is not my sentiment. That is the plain, traceable path of the text. From a prophet's nursery, through a wilderness courtship, into two apostles' letters, out across the nations, and down the long centuries to tonight. So let the three children sleep, at last, under their finished names. God sows, and the sowing is love. Ruhama, beloved, Ammi, my people. The house is quiet. The names are healed. And somewhere beyond the story, the same voice that reversed them is still at work, doing the only thing this whole book has ever shown him doing. Speaking the old wounded names of the world, one by one, and turning them over like spring soil. Yours is somewhere in the pile. It may already be turned. Chapter 13. I will heal their waywardness. Every book of the Bible ends in its own way. Some end with a burial. Some end with a battle. Some simply stop, mid-history, like a road running out of pavement. The Book of Hosea ends with an invitation. And after everything we have walked through tonight, the lawsuit and the slave market, the terrible names and their reversal, the last chapter of this book is so gentle, so quiet, that it feels less like an ending and more like a hand smoothing a blanket. Listen to how it opens. "Return, O Israel, to the Lord your God, for you have stumbled because of your iniquity." Return. It is the great word of this entire book, and in Hebrew it is the word shuv, which simply means to turn around. Not to climb, not to achieve, not to repair everything first and then come present the repairs. Just to turn. The whole invitation of this book is folded into the smallness of that request. The distance home, this book insists, is never the miles you wandered. It is one turn. And then the prophet does something almost tender beyond words. He knows his people. He knows that the hardest part of returning, for anyone who has been away long, is the doorway. What do you even say after everything? So the prophet writes the speech for them. He puts the words in their mouths, like a father coaching a child before a hard apology. "Take with you words," he says, "and return to the Lord. Say to him, take away all iniquity. Accept what is good, and we will pay with the fruit of our lips. Take with you words, not bulls, not silver, not the sacrifices that had become a corrupt industry in the courtyards of Israel. Words, the one offering everyone can afford, the offering of an honest mouth." And notice what the coached prayer includes, because it names the very idols we have watched all night. "Assyria shall not save us," the returning people are taught to say. "We will not ride on horses. And we will say no more, our God, to the work of our hands." The foreign alliances renounced. The military calculations renounced. The handmade gods renounced by name. The prayer is short, but it closes every door the heart had been leaving open. And it ends with the reason, the only reason this book has ever really given. For in you the orphan finds mercy. The orphan. After 11 chapters of the wife and the son, the book's final prayer reaches for a third picture of the human condition. The smallest and most defenseless one. The one with no claim at all, no covenant, no leverage, nothing to negotiate with. In you the orphan finds mercy. That is the ground a person stands on when they finally come home. Not their record, his character. And now comes the answer. Because the coached prayer is not left hanging in the air. God replies, and his reply is the summit of the entire book. I will heal their waywardness. I will love them freely, for my anger has turned from them. Stay on the first sentence. I will heal their waywardness. Not, I will punish it. Not even, I will forgive it, though he does. Heal it. The Hebrew treats the wandering itself as a sickness, a wound in the will, something bent that needs mending rather than merely pardoning. And that changes everything about how this book understands people like Gomer, and people like Israel, and people like us. The one who keeps leaving is not only guilty, the one who keeps leaving is sick in the oldest sense, wounded in the very place that chooses. And what God promises at the end of Hosea is not just a cleared record, it is a cure. He does not only forgive the wandering heart, he sets about healing the wanderer out of it. And then, I will love them freely. The Hebrew word carries the sense of a free will offering, something given with no compulsion and no invoice, love with no meter running. After a whole book of misdirected gratitude, of gifts credited to lovers and idols, God announces a love that does not even wait for the gratitude to be corrected. Freely, because he wants to. It is the deepest answer to the question the whole night has been asking, which is why? Why pursue her? Why pay the 15 shekels? Why teach the child to walk, knowing there has only ever been one answer, and it is not in Israel. It is in him. What follows, in the final verses of the prophecy, is a garden. I will be like the dew to Israel, God says. He shall blossom like the lily. He shall take root like the trees of Lebanon. His shoots shall spread out. His beauty shall be like the olive, and his fragrance like Lebanon. They shall return and dwell beneath my shadow. They shall flourish like the grain. They shall blossom like the vine. Count the images. Dew, lily, roots, olive, grain, vine, shadow, fragrance. The book that opened in a broken house closes in a watered garden. And of all those images, let the first one carry you towards sleep, because I believe the prophet chose it with care. I will be like the dew, not like the storm. Baal was the storm god, the god of the dramatic downpour, the noisy blessing you could see coming for miles, the flash and the thunder and the water all at once. God does not say, I will outstorm the storm god. He says, I will be like the dew. And dew is the quietest water there is. It falls without sound, without spectacle. It asks for no attention and gets none. No one has ever watched dew arrive. You cannot. There is nothing to watch. It does not gather on the horizon. It does not announce itself on the roof. It simply comes in the dark while everyone is asleep, and it misses nothing. Every blade of grass, every leaf, down to the smallest, every spider's thread strung between two stems, hung with silver by morning. In the dry summers of that land, scholars will tell you months could pass without rain, and it was the dew, night after night, that kept the vineyards alive between rains. Not the storm, the dew, the quiet nightly faithfulness that no one saw and everything lived on. That is the promise this book chooses to end on. Not that God will always come in thunder, in the dramatic rescue, the visible miracle, but that he comes like dew, nightly, silently, while you sleep, doing the sustaining work that no one sees and everyone lives on. Some of you have been waiting for a storm, some great loud answer, and it has not come. Consider, tonight, that the answer may have been arriving all along, the other way, in the small mercies that were simply there each morning, strength you did not remember gathering, bread you did not notice being provided. The dew method. It has kept older vineyards than yours alive, and it is falling right now. On the fields outside the city, on the roofs of your street, on everything that sleeps and everything that cannot. The last line of the prophecy steps back, like a signature. Whoever is wise, let him understand these things. For the ways of the Lord are right, and the upright walk in them. The book is nearly closed now. One chapter remains for us. One last walk back through everything, to see where the whole story was pointing. But the invitation of this chapter stays open all night. It is only a turn. It was only ever a turn. And the dew is already falling. Sleep now, while it falls.
Chapter 14. The Love That Paid the Price. Come back with me, one last time, to the marketplace. The crowd has gone home. The stalls are empty. The dust is settling in the late light, and the corner where human beings stood to be sold is just a corner again. But something happened here that the dust cannot cover. A man walked into this place with everything he had, 15 shekels of silver and a homer and a half of barley, and walked out with his wife's hand in his. All night, that price has followed us. I told you at the beginning that this story ends in a slave market, with a husband counting out silver. We stood in that market and watched him pay. And I want to finish tonight by asking the question the whole book of Hosea has been quietly asking underneath every chapter. What was the price for? Because here is the strange arithmetic of it. Gomer was his wife. By every law and every custom, she was already his. He was buying back what already belonged to him. The silver did not purchase ownership. It purchased her freedom, and it purchased it from the consequences of her own choices. The debt was hers. The payment was his. That is the transaction at the heart of this book. And once you see its shape, you begin to see it everywhere in Scripture, the way you notice a face in a crowd once you know it is there. Because Hosea was not the last man to walk into the marketplace of someone else's debt. Nearly 8 centuries after the prophet, in the same small land, a teacher from Nazareth stood up in the synagogues, and among the scriptures he reached for was this very book. Twice, the Gospel of Matthew records, Jesus took one particular line of Hosea and set it before the religious experts of his day. Go and learn what this means, he told them. I desire mercy and not sacrifice. Go and learn what this means. He said it twice. Of all the Old Testament, that was a verse Jesus quoted and carried into his teaching, the beating heart of Hosea, held up against the hard religion of his time. And we have already heard tonight how the Gospel of Matthew set the words of Hosea 11, "Out of Egypt I called my son," over the childhood of Jesus himself. The early church read this book and heard in it the shape of the story they were telling the world. And that story, as the New Testament tells it, moves with the exact shape of Hosea's story, only vaster. The bridegroom who comes for a bride who did not remain faithful. The father who watches the road for the child in the far country. And at the center, the purchase. Paul the Apostle wrote it to the Corinthians in the language of the marketplace itself. You were bought with a price. And Peter, whom we have heard tonight already, spelled out the currency. Not with perishable things such as silver or gold, he wrote, but with the precious blood of Christ. On a hill outside Jerusalem, Christians believe the transaction of the slave market was performed again at full scale. The debt was ours. The payment was his. The innocent party settled the account of the guilty one, not because he had to, but for the same reason Hosea walked through that whispering crowd. Because rights were never what he wanted. He wanted her. He wanted them. He wanted you. I have kept my promises to you all night about what is text and what is telling, so let me keep them once more, plainly. The Book of Hosea does not mention that hill. It could not. It was written more than 700 years too soon. But the apostles who stood on the other side of that hill looked back at books like this one and said, this is what it was all rehearsing. And when Hosea is read aloud in the churches to this day, it is read as the Old Testament's most piercing portrait of a love that would one day have a face. So now the whole night can be gathered in, like a table being cleared, gently, piece by piece. The command that made no sense, go love someone who will break your heart, was God showing us his own heart's daily work. The 3 children with the terrible names were the truth spoken out loud, so that the reversal, when it came, would land on the exact syllables of the wound. The lawsuit at the city gate ended with the plaintiff setting down the verdict he had won. The wilderness was not the punishment. It was the place without rivals, where love could speak upon the heart. The door of hope was hung, on purpose, in the valley named Trouble. The many days after the marketplace taught us that redemption is a moment, and healing is a season, and both are his. The Father who taught Ephraim to walk is still watching the road, and his compassion grows warm, not cold, with the years. And the dew is falling tonight, silently, on fields that will only discover it in the morning. That is the Book of Hosea. One man's broken marriage, opened like a window, so that the world could look through it into the heart of God. Now the lamp is low, and it is time for the blessing. Receive it slowly. There is no hurry left anywhere in this night. May the God of Hosea call you by your true name, the one on the far side of every reversal, not the names the years pinned on you, the name he sows in spring soil. May you stop crediting the wrong sources for your bread and find, behind every good thing you have ever held, the one hand that was always giving it. If you are in the wilderness, may you hear the tender voice that goes there on purpose, and find the door of hope standing open in your own valley of trouble. If you are in the many days, the slow season between the buying back and the being whole, may you be patient with the inches, for heaven is patient with them. And when you cannot feel any of it, may the dew still fall on you, the quiet, nightly mercy that asks for nothing and misses no one, until the morning shows you how watered you have been all along. The marketplace is empty now. The silver has been counted, and it was enough. The house at the edge of town is dark and at peace, 3 children asleep under healed names, a lamp in the window burning down to a soft ember. This is night psalms, where the ancient words find the ones who need them. Tonight they found you. You were bought back long ago. Rest now,